There's many ways in music to make your audience expect something specific and then surprising them by doing exactly not that. As you can imagine, this is one of the most standard tools in Nik's music, and in this video I want to examine two more of his 80 songs, What the Papers Say and Monkey Business, where he plays around with our expectations. Oh, and by the way, this is the point where I'll finally talk about Modal Mixture on this channel. This video is part of an analysis series that I dedicate to several Nik Kershaw songs that haven't fit into one of my previous videos yet, but nevertheless are worth having a closer look at.
Time for a closer look.
So, first idea on how to trick your audience into expecting a certain outcome. Repeat the intro melody several times until the audience has a secure feeling of what is to come next. This is really cheeky. But okay, F-sharp minor is not completely out of this world, because you only need to turn our expected tonic from before into its parallel major variant and take its relative minor chord. When borrowing chords from the major or minor variant of your main key like this, it is called Modal Mixture. I haven't mentioned this term earlier, but this technique surely is the source for many of Nik's chord progressions, for example in The Riddle. All the chords can be easily related to either F-sharp minor, the main or let's say primary key, and its major variant F-sharp major. Although this doesn't tell the whole story about all the cool little things he does on the way, but okay. Now in What the Papers Say, we don't stay in F-sharp minor for too long, because this progression suggests a modulation to D major or B minor. Whichever it is reached through this great little moment. I really love those tritone progressions. From there on, Nik plays around with chords from the key of B minor for a little while. You can ask, of course, whether this E over G sharp chord is borrowed from a B Dorian scale, or whether it indicates a modulation to A major that never is fulfilled. Then, with just the next few chords, he modulates to B flat major. This works especially well because this C over E chord is especially ambiguous. On one side, it can be regarded as an inversion of B minor's flat second degree. In classical terms, this is a Neapolitan sixth chord. There is plenty of videos on the Neapolitan sixth chord here on the internet you can watch to get deeper into it, but the very short version is that in its most prominent appearance, it is a substitution for the chord over the fourth scale degree, which uses an out of scale minor second scale degree instead of the first scale degree. Another explanation for this chord, and I think this is more appropriate to Nik's conception, would be that it perfectly fits into a real falling fifth sequence that takes off from the G major chord. So now that we're in B flat major, or should we rather say B flat mixolydian? But here it's B flat convincing major. And then C minor is more apt. Anyway, from the C minor onwards, the next four chords are the same as in the B minor section from before, only transposed up a semitone. Then we have a progression with a bass moving stepwise upwards that could comfortably lead us into F minor or F major or something like that. Well, here we got tricked again, but A minor also works nice, because at the very last instance of our preparation progression, we have a C major over E, which has the fifth scale degree of A minor in the bass, and thus technically works like a kind of dominant substitution. This is a very wide topic again. To put it short, this chord has only notes home to the key of A minor, and the bass stages the 5-1 movement that is most characteristic for a perfect cadential progression. So even if we don't have the standard E major A minor cadential progression here, this works very well as a dominant substitution. It's here in the chorus that we get our chord progression from the intro back for the first time. There's an alteration of this chord progression when the melody is about to repeat. It even touches on some fifth leap harmony again that is so characteristic for Nik. As mentioned before, it's quite nice when you don't straight up repeat your melody from before, but give it some slight alteration while being still recognizably similar. Speaking of recognizably similar, there's some familiar stuff going on in this song, which was the B-side for the Wouldn't It Be Good single, also starts off in A minor and has a verse section starting in F sharp minor. Let's have a closer look at the chord progression in the chorus. You might recognize a certain pattern of the root note moving down a fourth and then up a third. Until this point, it is the same type of sequence Nik uses in Roses, only in a different key. So if you're interested in how Nik uses those kinds of sequences, make sure to check out my analysis on Roses, if you didn't already. Note how the fourth step of this chord chain, the D major chord, brings an F sharp to the table, which widens the A minor spectrum to the sharp side, while the F major following bounces back to pure A minor scale material. This is where Nik jumps off the consequent chord treatment in favor of a B flat major chord, which widens the A minor spectrum again, this time to the flat side of the circle of fifths. It sounds nice, since as mentioned so many times before now, real fifth leaps always work well. But it's also nice that with the D major and the B flat major we have two chords that A minor alone is not sufficient at describing. When having a look at the circle of fifths again, we can recognize that we get a more satisfying explanation for this expanded chord inventory when taking at least the neighboring scales into account. It's a characteristic Nik Kershaw thing that even with this very unspectacular 9-bar chorus, he doesn't just use chords that can be easily described with one scale only. I can't tell, however, if this is on purpose or if I tend to interpret a little too much from a music theory point of view. It can be a tool to play around with if you're searching to expand your own harmonic vocabulary. With the jump from C to G, he opens up the possibility for a new chorus iteration, which he does in the later course of the song. But with this cheesy little instrumental fill-up thing, he can create a transition to a verse starting in F sharp minor at the same time. If you have a complete listen through the verse section, you will notice that the harmonic structure feels quite closely related to the chorus section. So out of touch with me. But strangely enough, this familiarity doesn't reveal itself when comparing the chord progression from each respective section. You can argue that it sounds similar because the verse section is just a transposition of the chorus section from the second member of the chord chain onwards, and that the fourth leap downward at the beginning turning into a fifth doesn't count, because as complementary intervals they are similar enough. But this doesn't tell the whole story, especially for this member of the chord chain. Well, to explain where this subcutaneous similarity stems from, we have to take a close listen into what the keyboard does. I'm not completely sure whether this is what the keyboarder actually played, because there's many overtones in the sound selection, and I'm really not an expert in 80s synths, but this separate transcription is my best effort. I've reduced the syncopations so that we get a rhythmically plain harmonic reduction. If we now focus only on the outermost voices of this texture and ignore everything else, we can find that at least for the first 4 members of this chain, there really is a sequential logic. The top voice always moves on later than the low voice, meanwhile creating a consequent chain of 7ths and 6ths. I don't know if done on purpose or not, but this references a very long historic tradition, because you can hear those 7/6 sequences in all kinds of Western music. It's secondary with which exact chords this schema is completed, The primary thing is that it's treated consequently. And the basic concept of consequent treatment, no matter whether it's the chord or the voice leading, is what both of these sections have in common and makes us listeners relate them to each other, even if we are not able to tell which is the exact parameter that is treated consequently. One could argue that this is yet another level of Nik playing with his audience, but it's very likely that I took way more consideration into all of this than he and his band members ever did. The next chords suggest a cadential progression towards A minor. But this is evaded through the 6th scale degree of its parallel major variant. So here we're using Modal Mixture to bring us back into the starting point of the verse. The second verse round is almost the same as the first. It's very interesting, however, that Nik avoids the clear cadential progression from before, which could bring us very resolutely back into the A minor chorus, and decides to substitute it with a softer major variant of the D chord. This was quite a lot of analysis for a song that seems so insignificant at first sight, and maybe wasn't even meant as serious. But believe me, from here on, it will only get wilder.